A billionaire accustomed to dictating the world, until he opened an email not meant for him. There, a confession. The unseen woman of the house saw everything and loved the man he concealed himself to be. What would you do if the only person who truly sees you is the one who has never been seen? One decision, a chasm between classes, and a gesture that could liberate or destroy. Ready to discover what happens when power stumbles upon love? Monday arrived with the persistent, unseasonable warmth that clung to New York City that October. Alexander Thorne awoke at 5:30 as always, and the first thing he did was open his laptop before even brushing his teeth. The screen's light illuminated his face in the still dark bedroom of his Upper East Side townhouse, and he clicked into the estate's shared email inbox. It was a system he himself had implemented 3 years prior, having realized the house operated like a small enterprise. 15 staff members, weekly purchases, service schedules, programmed maintenance. Everything logged, everything traceable. No paper notes or phone calls lost to the ether. He scrolled through the messages. A request to purchase cleaning supplies. An air conditioning maintenance appointment. A notice regarding a shift change. Nothing that demanded his immediate attention. The coffee in the mug beside his laptop was already cold, and he did not even recall having prepared it. It was like this every morning, his body functioning on autopilot while his mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating, planning, anticipating. But then, among the organized folders, he saw a draft without a recipient. The title simply read, "Unsent Letter." Alexander hesitated. He was not a man to invade another's privacy, but the system was institutional. He had made it clear, from the outset, that everything within it was monitored for compliance purposes. He clicked. The screen flickered. The cursor remained poised. The initial lines caused his posture to stiffen in the chair. The author was Camila Rodriguez, the staff member who had coordinated the second-floor cleaning for 2 years. He knew her by sight, a 28-year-old woman, always silent, efficient, unseen. The letter began by describing her work with an almost military organization. She recounted how she had learned to anticipate needs before they were requested, how she prepared environments without noise, without leaving a trace. There was a contained pride in those words, the pride of one who performs well a task no one observes. Alexander read each sentence twice, paying attention to the specific details she had chosen to mention. Subsequently, she mentioned her sister. She sent a portion of her salary each month to assist with her college tuition. Her sister was studying education at a community college in Queens. Camilla wrote about this with the same discretion with which she cleaned the rooms, without expecting recognition, merely doing what needed to be done. But it was the subsequent paragraph that caused Alexander to halt his breath. The air seemed to grow heavier within the room. Outside, the city commenced its daily awakening, yet he registered nothing now but the thrumming of his own heart in his ears. I know you will never read this, and perhaps it is better that way, because what I feel changes nothing. It alters neither who I am nor who you are. Yet sometimes, when tidying your office, I look at your desk and wish I could be the type of person who could simply sit there and converse. Not as an employee, just as someone. But that would be to mistake dignity for fantasy. And I promised myself I would never do that. Alexander withdrew his hands from the keyboard. His chest tightened, not from embarrassment, but from something he could not name. Camila Rodriguez loved him, or felt something akin to it. And she possessed the courage to admit it to herself, though not to him. She held the intelligence to comprehend that it altered no fundamental reality. He ran a hand across his face, Feeling the stubble rasp against his palm, he continued reading, now more slowly, savoring each word as if it were the last. The final paragraph diverged markedly. The writing became tauter, the sentences shorter. Camilla denounced the estate manager, Frederick Sterling. According to her account, Frederick had been deducting percentages from employees' wages under the pretense of non-existent housing fees. She possessed the evidence, spreadsheets he had left open on the office computer, doctored receipts, and he threatened her. Should she speak, she would face dismissal for cause. He would fabricate absences, create witnesses. She had no means to defend herself. Alexander slowly closed the laptop. He took a deep breath. Then he reopened it and reread the entire letter, word by word. Outside, the sun began to paint the sky orange. He did not respond. It would have been the immediate inclination of any man to reply, to explain, to reassure. But Alexander Thorne was not any man. He had constructed an industrial conglomerate spanning from infrastructure to logistics, precisely because he understood the virtue of patience. He knew when to act and when to observe. And in that moment, the only certainty was that any precipitous reaction would wound Camilla more profoundly than silence. She had not composed that letter for him. She had written it for herself. And he had just intruded upon the sole space where she allowed herself vulnerability. Guilt began to rise in his throat, bitter as gall. He spent the morning discussing cement expansion with American investors. Profit margins, deadlines, reverse logistics. His voice was firm, his answers precise. But his mind strayed. It was at the Thorne estate, second floor, where Camilla worked. It fixated on her mentioned doctored spreadsheets and Frederick Sterling's threat. The man he'd entrusted with his home, greeted weekly, awarded bonuses, and considered loyal. During a meeting break, Alexander went to the restroom. He locked himself in a stall, pressing hands against the cold wall. He breathed, once, twice, thrice. He sought to organize the ceaselessly swirling thoughts within his mind. Returning to his apartment that evening, he bypassed the bedroom for the study. He accessed the company's compliance system, formulating a plan for justice, not vengeance nor rescue. Camilla Rodriguez required evidence, a position accessing the estate's financial records, and protection against retaliation. Alexander needed to ascertain if Frederick was merely an opportunistic thief or something more sinister. He worked until 3 in the morning, making notes, outlining scenarios, anticipating objections. Sleep eluded him when he finally lay down. He stared at the ceiling, at shadows cast by streetlights through the partly drawn curtain. He envisioned Camilla cleaning his study, gazing at his desk, imagining unspoken conversations. He contemplated her daily endurance, carrying that secret like stones upon her back. The following morning, he convened a meeting with the estate's administrative staff. Frederick, in a tailored gray suit, hair slicked back, bore an easy smile. He exuded expensive cologne. His fingernails were immaculate. Alexander announced a 90-day administrative modernization for the estate, creating a new general housekeeper position. This role would standardize processes, organize inventories, review payrolls. "I require someone intimately familiar with household routines," Alexander stated neutrally. "Someone proven capable of anticipating issues." He looked directly at Camilla, standing in the corner, clad in her white uniform, hands clasped. She did not stir, nor lift her gaze. Alexander observed her quick intake of breath. "Camilla Rodriguez, do you accept?" She blinked. Her face remained impassive, yet Alexander discerned the subtle dilation of her pupils. He noted her hard swallow before responding. "I accept, sir." Frederick smiled, Yet his eyes did not follow the smile. There was something hard there, something calculating. The warmth of October gave way to the crispness of November, but inside the Thorne estate, the air conditioning maintained a constant 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Camila Rodriguez spent her mornings in the small office adjacent to the kitchen, reviewing spreadsheets that Frederick reluctantly provided. The room smelled of old paper and reheated coffee. A small window overlooked the internal garden, but she rarely glanced outside. She was too engrossed in deciphering numbers that refused to reconcile. Frederick never outright refused. He merely delayed. He claimed he needed to organize the files before sharing them, that some documents were under external audit, that certain suppliers had confidentiality policies. Each excuse came with an apologetic smile, a gesture of helplessness, as if he too were constrained by bureaucracies beyond his control. Camilla did not press. She simply took note. In a hardbound notebook she had purchased with her own money, she recorded every excuse, every delay, every inconsistency. Her handwriting was small and precise, almost like old-school penmanship. Frederick Sterling was meticulous, but not flawless, and the more he attempted to conceal, the more evident it became that there was something to hide. She learned to recognize the patterns. When Frederick was nervous, he would drum his fingers on the table. When he was lying, he would look to the left before answering. When he was planning something, he became excessively quiet. Camilla observed all of this in silence, archiving each piece of information as one assembles a puzzle, piece by piece. One morning, as Frederick departed for a meeting with suppliers, Camilla entered his office. She did not force open drawers. She did not violate passwords. She merely looked at the computer screen he had left on, open to a payment spreadsheet. Her heart raced, her hands trembled, but she retrieved her phone and photographed it. Quickly, 3 clicks. The sound of the shutter seemed to echo in the empty room. She slipped the phone into her apron pocket and exited before anyone noticed. As she closed the door behind her, she had to lean her back against the wall for a moment, waiting for the dizziness to subside. That night, in the rented apartment she shared with her sister Letitia in Jackson Heights, Queens, she opened the photos. The phone's light illuminated her face in the darkness. Letitia was already asleep in the adjacent bed, breathing with the steady rhythm of someone untroubled by significant worries. Camilla compared the figures with the receipts the employees themselves had shown her. The discrepancy was minor in each instance. $25 here, $40 there. But multiplied by 15 employees, over 6 months, it amounted to nearly $4,000. Frederick Sterling was no amateur thief. He was methodical. He was patient. And he had likely been doing this for far longer than 6 months. "You're meddling with something dangerous," Letitia said suddenly, making Camilla jump. She had not been asleep. "If he finds out, you'll lose your job. If I do nothing, he will continue to steal from people who earn less than I do." Letitia turned in bed, propping her head on her hand. She was 22, with a slender face and eyes like Camilla's. "You've always been this way. Since childhood. You can never witness an injustice and remain silent." Camilla offered a mirthless smile. "Mom always said it would get me killed one day, and she was right." But Camilla did not cease. In the ensuing days, she began to instruct staff members to retain their pay stubs. She established a digital shared folder where everyone could log queries regarding deductions. She instituted weekly meetings to clarify procedures. Frederick attended all of them, perpetually smiling, consistently collaborative. Yet Camilla observed the tension in his shoulders. She noted the manner in which he evaded her gaze. She perceived how his responses became progressively more evasive. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, he summoned her for a private conversation. Frederick's office smelled of stale coffee and old paper. A window overlooked the mansion's internal garden, but the curtains were perpetually drawn. He preferred to work in the dim light, with only the desk lamp illuminating his table. A yellowish glow cast harsh shadows upon his face. Camilla entered and remained standing, waiting. He did not invite her to sit. He offered no water. He simply reclined in his leather chair, observing her with that gaze she had learned to dread. "You're doing commendable work," Frederick stated, leaning back in the leather chair. His voice was soft, almost paternal, the kind of voice an uncle might employ to offer counsel. "Organizing the spreadsheets, conversing with the team. Mr. Thorne has been impressed." Camilla did not reply. She kept her hands clasped before her, her feet firm on the floor. She would not allow him to perceive her fear. "However, I have observed something," Frederick continued, and now there was a different note in his voice. Something sharper. "You have been asking questions about suppliers, about deductions, about fees. It is my work. Your work is to organize the household, not to investigate." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His hands were large, with dark hair on his fingers. "These fees you are questioning? They exist. They are legitimate. Subsidized housing, transport, meals. All documented. Will not be difficult to show me the documentation." Frederick smiled, yet it was not a benevolent smile. It was the sort of smile wolves exhibit before an attack. "Camilla, you are an intelligent young woman. You work diligently. You care for your sister. I admire that." He paused, as if carefully selecting his words. "But you must comprehend one thing. There are matters within this house that are larger than you, larger than I. If you persist in meddling where you should not, you will be harmed." Camilla felt her heart quicken. She felt the sweat begin to trickle down her back. Yet her voice remained steady. "Is that a threat?" "It is advice." She drew a deep breath. The air seemed too thin, insufficient. "Thank you for the advice, Mr. Sterling, but I will continue to do my job. Excuse me." She turned to leave, but he spoke again. His voice was different now, lower, more dangerous. "Your sister, Leticia, she studies at Queen's Community College, doesn't she? Education, second year." Camilla froze. She felt her blood run cold through her veins. She turned slowly, as if moving underwater. "What does my sister have to do with this?" Frederick opened a drawer and pulled out a printed photograph. He placed it delicately on the table, like someone laying down a playing card. It was Leticia leaving college, backpack on her shoulders, talking with a friend. The photo had been taken from a distance, with a zoom lens, but her face was perfectly clear. Her carefree expression, her smile, were visible. "Nothing," Frederick said, and now there was no smile left, only coldness. "I just think it's beautiful when sisters help each other. It would be a shame if something interfered with her studies. It would be a shame if she had to stop because of, well, lack of security." Camilla could not speak. Her throat tightened. She snatched the photo, crumpling it in her hand until her palm ached, and left without looking back. When she closed the door, her legs nearly gave way. Alexander Thorne knew nothing of this. He spent his days in endless meetings, negotiating export contracts, approving budgets, conversing with shareholders. His world was made of numbers, projections, strategies. But at night, when he returned to the Thorne estate, he observed. He saw how Camilla moved through the corridors with the same efficiency as ever, but with her shoulders a little more tense. He saw how she avoided Frederick. He saw how her hands sometimes trembled when holding a coffee cup. He did not speak to her. He could not. Any overture would be interpreted as favoritism, as inappropriate interest, and he did not wish to place her in a more vulnerable position than she already was. But he continued to monitor. Discreetly, he requested the conglomerate's internal audit team to review the Thorne estate's records, not as a formal investigation, merely as a routine check. Words mattered. They always mattered. What they found was sufficient to confirm Camilla's suspicions. There were discrepancies, small yet consistent, like wounds that bleed slowly, almost imperceptibly, but ultimately leave the body pale. Fees that did not correspond to actual services, duplicate suppliers, payments without invoices. A pattern. Always a pattern. Alexander summoned Thorne Global Holdings' general counsel for a confidential meeting. The office was located on the 20th floor of Thorne Tower, Park Avenue, Midtown Manhattan, overlooking the bustling cityscape and the congested traffic below. They settled into leather armchairs, with untouched coffee cooling in their cups. "I require a strategy," Alexander stated, flipping through the dossier he had brought. "If I dismiss Frederick now, he will claim wrongful termination. He will sue. And I do not wish for a legal battle that would expose the employee who reported these issues." The counsel, a man in his 60s with graying hair and wire-rimmed spectacles, nodded. He had witnessed many such cases. He understood the slow, grinding machinations of justice, which often crushed the victims in its inexorable process. You require irrefutable evidence, and a juncture at which the dismissal would be unimpeachable. I am working toward that. What Alexander did not comprehend was that Frederick Sterling was also laboring, and his design was simpler, more brutal: to destroy Camila Rodriguez before she could destroy him. He possessed years of experience in such maneuvers. He knew how to sow seeds of doubt. He knew how to construct narratives. He understood that a young, impoverished woman without connections would invariably be the initial suspect. It was in the first week of December that the event transpired. The arrival of early winter in New York was marked by a crisp, biting chill that seeped into even the heated interiors. A vintage pocket watch disappeared from a display case on the second-floor corridor. It was a valuable piece, an heirloom from Alexander's Irish immigrant great-grandfather. But its value was not monetary. It held profound sentimental significance. This fact was widely known. The watch had belonged to his great-grandfather, who had arrived in America with little more than a dream. It was among the few tangible links to the family's origins. Frederick was the first to observe its disappearance, or at least the first to report it. He assembled the staff one Saturday morning in the internal garden, beneath the venerable shade of an ancient oak that had stood there since the estate's inception. He then posed the question in a solemn, deliberate tone, laden with calculated concern. "Has anyone seen Mrs. Thorne's watch?" Silence ensued. Nervous glances exchanged. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak, but no one spoke. "It was here on Friday," Frederick continued, meeting the gaze of each employee, one by one. "And this morning it is gone. Someone needs to speak." Camilla, positioned at the rear of the gathering, felt her stomach clench. A cold perspiration trickled down her spine. She comprehended what was imminent. She knew before Frederick even turned his gaze to her with that expression of feigned solicitude. "Camilla, you were responsible for cleaning this floor yesterday, were you not?" "Yes. And you were the last person to enter this corridor before closing." "I cleaned the corridor at 5 in the afternoon. The watch was present." Her voice did not falter. She would not allow it. "Are you certain?" She hesitated. Not from doubt, but because she knew any hesitation would be leveraged against her. She knew she was treading a fine line, and any misstep could prove fatal. "I am certain." Frederick sighed. It was a perfect sigh, laden with disappointment and weariness. Look, Camilla, no one is accusing anyone, but we need to clarify this. Mr. Thorne will demand explanations, and if the watch does not reappear, we will need to take measures. Camilla looked around. She saw the other staff averting their gazes. She saw two women, Anna and Julia, who owed favors to Frederick, exchange significant glances. She understood everything. She understood she was alone. She understood Frederick had orchestrated this with meticulous care, with patience, with the cruelty of one who has nothing to lose. "I did not take the watch," she stated, her voice firm. "No one is saying you took it. We are merely trying to understand what occurred." Yet everyone present knew Frederick was implying precisely that. And everyone present knew such an accusation, even without proof, could shatter an entire life. Alexander learned of the watch's disappearance 2 hours later, when Frederick knocked on his office door on the 3rd floor. The December sun sliced through the window in warm shafts, and Alexander was reviewing contracts when the estate manager entered. He bore that carefully constructed expression of someone delivering bad news, but wishing they were not. "Mr. Thorne, I need to speak with you." Alexander raised his eyes. There was something in Frederick's tone that put him on alert. "What is it?" "Your great-grandfather's watch. It is gone." Alexander felt a tightening in his chest, not for the loss of the object, but for the manner in which Frederick spoke. There was a contained satisfaction in his voice, an ill-concealed anticipation, like someone telling a joke and awaiting the reaction. "When?" "Last night, most likely. It was last seen at 5 in the afternoon. Camilla Rodriguez was the last person in the corridor." Frederick paused. "She was responsible for the cleaning at that hour." Alexander took a deep breath. He rested his hands on the table, feeling the solid wood beneath his fingers. "Are you accusing Camilla?" "I am not accusing anyone, sir, merely reporting the facts." But there was something in his eyes, something that resembled triumph. "The facts are that the watch is missing, not that someone took it. With all due respect, sir, she had access, and she is the only one who had access after the cleaning hour. We have witnesses who confirm this." Alexander rose slowly. He walked to the window. Below, the city hummed with its perennial intensity. Cars, people, lives crossing without touching. He stood there for a long moment, his back to Frederick, organizing his thoughts like pieces on a chessboard. "Frederick, you know this household's policy. Before any disciplinary action, we verify 2 independent sources, always, without exception." "But sir." 48 hours. Alexander turned, his voice like steel. "You have 48 hours to bring me concrete proof. Until then, no one accuses anyone. Understood?" Frederick clenched his jaw, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." When he left, Alexander stood, looking out the window. New York City stretched to the horizon, a sea of gray buildings under the December sun. He knew what was happening. He knew Frederick was playing his last card, and he knew he had 48 hours to dismantle it. He picked up the phone. His fingers knew the number by heart. "I need all camera records from the Thorne estate for the past 7 days. I want to know who entered and exited every room. I want to know where every person was at every given time. And I want this within 24 hours. The cameras had been installed 6 months prior, as part of the security protocol Alexander had implemented at the estate. There were no microphones. There was no invasion of privacy in bedrooms or bathrooms. But in common areas, offices, and hallways, everything was recorded. And all staff knew this. It was in the contract they signed, explained in large print. Without legal jargon, Alexander had always been clear about it. Transparency was the foundation of everything. The audit team worked through the night. There were 3 individuals: a data analyst, an attorney specializing in labor law, and a security technician who understood cameras better than he understood people. They locked themselves in a room at the Thorn Tower office on Park Avenue, with coffee, cold pizza, and determination. The next morning, as the sun began to lighten the sky, Alexander had a complete dossier on his desk. He read page by page, cross-referenced times, noted inconsistencies in the margins. His handwriting was small, almost illegible, a result of years spent signing documents on the move. And when he finished, he had everything he needed. He had more than he needed. Frederick Sterling had entered the second-floor hallway at 4:30 on Friday afternoon, alone. The camera captured everything. Him looking around, checking if he was alone, opening the display case with a key only he possessed. He stayed there for 10 minutes. When he left, he carried something in his hand, wrapped in cloth. It was impossible to see what it was, but the shape was unmistakable. A small, rectangular box, the size of a watch. Half an hour later, Camila Rodriguez entered for routine cleaning. The camera showed her pushing the supply cart, cleaning the windows, wiping down surfaces. She stayed there for 20 minutes. When she left, her hands were empty, carrying only her usual cart. At no point did she approach the display case. Alexander closed the dossier. He rested his elbows on the desk, rubbed his tired eyes. He took a deep breath. The office air smelled of paper and stale coffee. Then he picked up the phone and made a call he did not want to make. The call that would change everything. "Mother, I need to speak with you." There was a pause on the other side. Then Beatrice Thorne's voice, always controlled. "When?" "Now." Beatrice Thorne arrived at the Thorne estate an hour later, in a black pantsuit and pearls, her hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She was 65, yet appeared a decade younger. Her posture was erect, her gaze direct, her voice firm. She had commanded the conglomerate for 20 years before passing the baton to Alexander. And she still wielded power, significant power. People still deferred when she entered a room, still measured their words in her presence. She entered the study without knocking. She never knocked. She sat in the armchair opposite her son's desk and crossed her legs with automatic elegance. "What is it, Alexander? You pulled me from an important meeting." "Please, sit, Mother. I am already seated." Alexander placed the dossier on the desk. He slid it toward her without a word. Beatrice picked it up, adjusted the reading glasses she only wore when alone or with family, and began to read. She turned the pages in silence. The only sound was the rustle of paper and the distant ticking of the wall clock. When she finished, she left the dossier on the desk, removed her glasses, and looked at her son with those dark eyes that had witnessed everything. "This is serious. I know. If you dismiss Frederick now, he will claim persecution. He will say he is being used as a scapegoat. He will hire expensive lawyers. He will sue. He will create a public spectacle. I am aware of that as well." "Then what do you intend to do?" There was something in her voice. Not precisely curiosity, perhaps respect. Alexander leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "There's an event in 2 weeks. The Thorne Philanthropic Foundation Gala. Press, donors, staff, everyone will be there." Beatrice frowned. For the first time in years, Alexander witnessed genuine surprise on her face. "You intend to do this publicly?" "I intend to do it the right way, with transparency, with proof, so that no one can question it." "Alexander, Beatrice hesitated. And that was rare. She never hesitated. You know, I have already spoken with Regina Albright about the engagement, about the merger. Alexander closed his eyes. He felt the weight of it all settling upon his shoulders. I know, Mother. The logistics merger with their company depends on this agreement. These are $15 million contracts. If I cancel, we will find another way to finalize the contract. It is not that simple. Her voice was lower now, almost gentle. It must be. Beatrice remained silent for a long moment. She regarded her son as if seeing someone she did not entirely know. Then she stood, smoothed the skirt of her pantsuit, and retrieved her handbag. You know this will have consequences. For you, for me, for the company. I know. She looked at him with an expression Alexander Thorne could not decipher. There was pride there, but also fear, also sadness. Then do what you must, she said, but do not expect me to agree. She left without looking back. The door closed with a soft click, yet it echoed through the empty office. The Thorne Philanthropic Foundation Gala took place every December in the Plaza Hotel's Grand Ballroom. It was the most important event of the year for the family. Donors, politicians, business executives, the press, all gathered to celebrate the scholarships the foundation funded for young people from underserved communities. It was a night of champagne, long gowns, speeches about meritocracy and opportunity. A night where everyone pretended the world was just. Alexander arrived early. He wore a dark suit, no tie, his hair still damp from showering. Camila Rodriguez was also there, though not as a guest. She was part of the support staff, serving drinks, arranging tables. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in a low bun. When their eyes met for a second, she quickly looked away. He saw the tension in her shoulders. He saw the fear. He saw the exhaustion of someone who had not slept in days. Frederick Sterling was impeccable, in a navy blue suit, silk tie, shoes shined until they gleamed. He greeted guests as if he were part of high society, as if he had always belonged to this world. Regina Albright stood beside Beatrice, laughing at something a legislator had just said. She wore a red dress, discreet yet expensive jewelry. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed under control. The city lights flickered below. New York City was an ocean of luminous points, and from up there, it seemed almost beautiful, almost just. Waiters circulated with trays of canapés. Musicians played soft jazz. Conversations flowed with the ease of those who had never needed to worry about money. But when it was Alexander's turn to make his speech, he ascended the stage with an envelope in his hand. The ballroom gradually silenced. Glasses paused mid-air. All eyes turned to him. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. His voice echoed through the loudspeakers. Polite applause, automatic smiles. We are here to celebrate what the Thorne Philanthropic Foundation represents. Merit, hard work, dignity. The idea that where you are born does not determine where you will arrive. More applause. Some guests already began to shift, anticipating a long and predictable speech. But for this to be true, we must practice what we preach, not just in public, but also in private, not just with strangers, but also with those who work in our homes. The ballroom began to fall silent, the heavy, dense kind of silence. Regina frowned. Beatrice leaned forward in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Alexander slowly opened the envelope, drawing out the moment. In recent weeks, I discovered that a member of my household staff had been embezzling funds from other employees. His voice was calm, yet there was steel in it. Small sums, $50 here, $80 there, fabricated fees, invented discounts. Over 6 months, this amounted to nearly $4,000. Money taken from people who earn minimum wage, people who support families, people who pay for college with this money. The murmur began as a low wind, then it swelled. Heads turned, searching for culprits. And when this irregularity was uncovered, the individual responsible attempted to cover it up by incriminating an innocent employee. Alexander looked directly at Frederick Sterling. Fabricated evidence, coached witnesses, stole an object of sentimental value, and tried to place the blame on someone else. Because it was easier to destroy a life than to admit one's own transgression. Frederick Sterling turned pale. He rose from his chair, but 2 security personnel were already beside him. He looked around, searching for support, but found only glances of disdain and morbid curiosity. "The evidence is here," said Alexander, holding up the dossier. "Cameras, spreadsheets, receipts, all documented, all verified by independent audit. Frederick Sterling is terminated for cause, and we will pursue appropriate legal action to ensure he returns every stolen cent." The silence in the ballroom was now absolute. Not even the waitstaff moved. It was as if everyone had forgotten to breathe. Alexander continued. His voice was firm, yet something in it was fracturing, something human. "But I am not merely here to dismiss a thief. I am here to sever an agreement that had been negotiated behind closed doors. An engagement. A commercial arrangement disguised as a marriage." Regina Albright rose, her face flushed. "Alexander, You knew," he stated, looking at her not with anger, but with sorrow. "You knew Frederick was fabricating the accusation. And you used it to pressure the agreement, to ensure the logistics contract was finalized before the scandal emerged. It is documented. You called him. The words were, 'Resolve the Camilla problem before the gala.'" Regina turned pale. She sat down slowly, as if her legs could no longer support her. Alexander drew a deep breath. He looked at his mother. Beatrice Thorne remained motionless, her face a perfect mask. Yet her eyes were moist. "I will not marry to close a contract, and I will not build a future upon the suffering of those who work for me." He looked at Camilla Rodriguez, who stood in the corner of the ballroom, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide. And for the first time since he had read her letter, he spoke directly to her. Not in private, but before everyone, before the world. Camilla Rodriguez had uncovered these irregularities. She possessed the fortitude to report them, even under direct threat. She undertook this action not for personal gain, but because it aligned with her convictions of what was inherently right. And she remains the pivotal reason for our assembly here today, engaging in this challenging discourse. I am indebted to her for a public apology, for my prior lack of perception, for my failure to provide protection sooner, for allowing her to confront this solitary burden. Camilla remained motionless. She simply stood, tears tracing paths down her face, her hands trembling, rendered speechless and immobile. Alexander descended from the stage. He moved deliberately among the tables. He did not glance toward his mother. He did not acknowledge Regina. He proceeded directly to Camilla, halted before her, and extended his hand. "Thank you," he stated, his voice a quiet murmur, intended solely for her. She observed his hand. Then her gaze ascended to his face. She gripped his hand with resolute firmness. "You are welcome, Mr. Thorne." 3 months later, life in New York City persisted with its unrelenting rhythm. Autumn ceded its place to winter, and the metropolis seemed to draw a slightly easier breath as the colder season arrived. Yet within the Thorne estate, Certain elements had irrevocably shifted, transformed in ways no one could have possibly foreseen. Frederick Sterling faced ongoing litigation in labor court. He had been ordered to return the embezzled funds, complete with monetary adjustments and penalties. He forfeited the residence he had acquired with the illicit gains. He lost his professional standing. He lost everything, and he garnered no sympathy from any quarter. Beatrice Thorne maintained her position on the group's board, but without the authority of a veto. Independent shareholders, having been profoundly impressed by Alexander's demonstrated transparency, had voted in favor of a comprehensive restructuring. She had not suffered total loss, but she had definitively learned that the global landscape had evolved, that the antiquated paradigms of conducting business no longer held validity. Regina Albright had indeed finalized the logistics contract, yet under publicly disclosed, audited terms, devoid of any preferential treatment. The prospect of marriage between them was never revisited. She had absorbed a severe lesson regarding the perils of conflating commercial negotiations with manipulative tactics. And Camila Rodriguez was no longer merely the quiet employee responsible for the second-floor cleaning. She now served as the general housekeeper, commanding a transparent salary, operating under a formal contract, and supervising a team of 5 individuals. She had initiated a traceable procurement system, established a scholarship endowment for employees' children, and instituted a payment calendar that eradicated any potential for phantom fees. Letitia continued her academic pursuits, now supported by a scholarship from the Thorne Philanthropic Foundation itself. One March afternoon, as the persistent chill of winter finally receded and the city hinted at an approaching rain, Alexander knocked on her office door. Camilla was engrossed in reviewing spreadsheets, her reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose. She looked up as he entered. "Excuse me, may I enter?" "Of course, Mr. Thorne." She removed her glasses, placing them upon the desk. "You may call me Alexander." She offered a subtle smile. "I may, but I will not." He chuckled softly. He settled into the chair, positioned opposite her desk. They remained in silence for a brief moment, the distant drone of traffic and the faint song of a bird in the garden permeating the quiet. "I wanted to ask you a question," he said. "You may ask. When you wrote that letter, did you know I had access to the email inbox?" Camilla hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "I knew. It's in the contract. Everyone knows. So you wanted me to read it. I wanted someone to know. Not necessarily you, but someone. Because I could no longer stay silent about what Frederick was doing, about what I felt, about everything." Alexander leaned forward. "And what you felt for me, do you still feel it?" Camilla met his gaze, unflinching. "I still do. But now I also feel other things. Respect, gratitude, and curiosity." "Curiosity?" "About who you are when you are not being the owner of everything, when you don't have to solve problems, when you can simply be." Alexander smiled. It was the first time in months that he truly smiled. "I also have curiosity about you, about who you are when you are not proving anything to anyone." "Then I suppose we have something to discover." "I suppose so." He stood up. He extended his hand. "Dinner? Friday evening? No formalities. No mansion, no company. Just you and me." Camilla shook his hand, and the touch was like a spark. "With one condition." "Which one?" "If we are to attempt something, it must be as equals, no favors, no concessions. And if it does not work out, I will continue working here as if nothing had happened. With dignity, with respect." "Agreed." She smiled, and it was the first time he had seen her truly smile. a smile that lit up her entire face, that reached her eyes. Then, until Friday, Alexander. Until Friday, Camilla. And when he departed, she remained looking out the window, watching the city stretch as far as the eye could see. New York City was immense, unequal, harsh. But in that moment, seated in that office she had earned through hard work, with courage, with the certainty that she had done what was right, Camilla